Welcome, Srilekha. Welcome to this episode of eLearning interviews. Srilekha has been designing curricula and developing course content for the creative and online business industry for more than 2.5 years. She has been a part of educational organizations of various sizes by offering consulting services to coaches and online entrepreneurs. She has created more than 30 online courses in marketing, business, entrepreneurship, and creativity. You're a course designer, Srilekha. So, how is it different from instructional designer?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Srita, for having me on here. Super excited to have this conversation. And yes, I think I know that you have, I watch a lot of your interviews, and I know that you have a lot of like traditional instructional designers on here. And the only thing I would say, why I call myself a course designer, or why that's now like an industry term and how that's different from instructional design, is that I don't think it's fully different from instructional design. I think there's a lot of elements of instructional design within course design itself. But I think the term in itself has come from the fact that I think in this day and age, because of a lot of e-learning and a lot of courses and edtech products that are being delivered directly to consumers, we see a lot of, I would say, they don't take one shape or form, right? They're so different. Each one is so dynamic, and one is like a purely recorded thing. One is like there's a cohort-based learning, and there's like hybrid, and there's all of these things. But in its essence, they're all courses. So I think the term in itself is about how to create these educational products more dynamically, and a part of that is definitely instructional design, of like figuring out like how best to deliver and reach learning outcomes, and creating assessments and all of that. And a lot of that is also it's like okay, like what how can we like make this fun? How can we how does it tie back into the business model of the company? And like how do we create a whole learning experience? How do we do user research and analysis? And there's so many different aspects of it, more than just instructional design, which is why I relate a little bit more to the term course design, because in its essence, we're designing the entire experience, as well as the content, as well as the course, all of that.
So you're an independent consultant. How do you decide upon the projects that you want to do?
Yeah, I love the fact that there are so many different types of projects, and that I don't just work on one topic and one type of thing. And the way I go about deciding that is, of course, there's a lot of inbound queries that I get because of the fact that I create content on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram. So wherever it reaches people who have a particular need to work with someone to help them create an effective learning product. So they reach out to me, and if I feel like it's a good fit between the both of us, of like what specific problem within on their current journey are they trying to solve, and am I the best person to help them with that? And if I do, if it falls under the things that I consider my core strengths, then I onboard them, and we get to working on whatever problems they are looking to solve. And I also spend a lot of time scrolling on the internet. So I come across a lot of interesting projects and a lot of interesting products that people are creating. If I find a really nice course and I look at it and I'm like, hey, I have all these ideas of ways that I think I can take it to the next level and elevate this whole thing, I reach out to them directly. And I'm like, hey, this is who I am. And I went through your curriculum, I went through your offering on your website, and I really think that we can add these aspects of it. And I think we can change the curriculum this way, maybe target to this group. And like, I'd love to work with you to help you do that. So those are two different ways that I not only find, but also choose the projects that I work on.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear about the content marketing side of it, as well as you seem to be always on thinking, how can this course be improved, or what they have tried and what else they can try, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with being independent, it's as opposed to in-house, I would say, of course, that you have to keep refining on your skills and learning more about what's up and coming in this field. But yeah, a lot of it is also marketing yourself and like finding the clients, finding work to even like work on. So yeah, it is very interesting.
So how is your approach differ from different types of courses like marketing or creativity?
Yeah, I think the approach in itself is very much rooted in the people that we're creating this course for. So the first step in anything that I work on, whether it's creating a course from scratch or taking an existing course and auditing it and revamping it and making it better. So irrespective of what stage I'm at working with the client, the first thing is always to understand the ideal student. So I try to, like, there's not someone who's maybe even bought the course. It's just someone that if you have a good picture of who you want to teach this particular thing to, let's go speak to them, right? Like, let's understand, like, what are their pain points, what are their desires, what have they tried in the past to solve this pain point, what hasn't worked out for them, things like that. And I think everything is rooted in that. When you understand the people that you want to teach, first of all, what happens is that as subject matter experts, right? They have a lot of they think at a completely other level than a beginner would think, and I think having that beginner mindset is super important for them as well. So they might assume that, like, oh no, this is like, this prerequisite is too obvious. It's like they must already know this and stuff like that. So, but you actually speak to students, you understand that no, they don't. So collecting that data is super important. So I think in that essence, the way to approach making a marketing course or a creative course in a sense doesn't change at all. I think as instructional designers, we know that it's not about the topic at all. Like, everything follows like a proven roadmap. So you can add in any topic, and if it works, the learning journey will still work. So I think it's once you understand who you're trying to target and know how to what really speaks to them, then I think you can go about creating the course, irrespective of what topic it is, similar way.
That's really an eye-opener. And do you conduct interviews with this ideal persona, or is there a number of people you need to talk to?
Yeah, so ideally it would be a good chunk of people to get different types of people, like even within the ideal student, right? Everyone's on a kind of a different journey. So ideally you would want to talk to a good bunch, but it's easier said than done to find these people, especially when I'm working directly with companies or coaches, creators, etc. Like, they might not have such a big audience to even get like a lot of people on board. So what we do first is I create a questionnaire for them. And so first, what they do is float around a questionnaire. So that can go to a bit more number of people. So they fill out the questionnaire, it has all these questions and things like that. And at the end of the questionnaire, there's also an option like, hey, if you would like to get on call with someone and actually have a conversation about this, if you're willing, like, please mark yes. And so whoever does offer up their time, then I encourage the subject matter experts, or sometimes I myself do it. I get on calls with them and like go through the questionnaire and also try to go deeper into some aspects of it, of like, oh, you're like, what are your top 3 problems in this? Okay, cool. Like, if there's like a surface level problem, there's an actual deeper problem. So like, let's take that and like, what is the actual problem with this, right? Like, what are you actually trying to solve? And that stuff only comes in conversation. So ideally, yeah, I think interviewing them and talking to them is the best way to get to what you to get all the data that you want. But because of like a lot of limitations of people, not willing to just offer up their time to do this, I think a questionnaire still helps to get like a good this thing of, yeah, we can identify patterns here. And I think it's just about that, of like, if you have enough people, you have answers from enough people, you can identify patterns. Oh, they're all going through the same thing. They're all getting stuck here. They're all like, this is where they all want to be. And then the transformation in itself that we want to give them starts getting shaped through that.
That's interesting to know that the questionnaire and conversations are not either or. You can use them as a combination.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when someone approaches you for an online course, what are the steps that you follow? What is the process?
Yeah, I think if someone's creating their course from scratch, right, they're like, hey, I am a performance elevation like trainer. I have been doing this with people with CXOs or mid management for all this time, and now I want to make a course out of it. Like, how do I go about doing that? So if someone's creating it from scratch, as I mentioned, the first step is always student research. So like, we're not gonna decide anything until we speak to students. So we speak to them and we gather enough data to form some level of strategy. So, and then we're like, okay, cool. We have a good understanding of this is what they want. This is why they're not able to get it. And this is something that that you can deliver because this is your this is your area of expertise. So then we go about creating the transformation statement, deciding a name that we really feel like will resonate with these students, figuring out pricing, like, is this going to be like a very high ticket product, or is it like is it like a mid ticket product, or is it like a super affordable offering? Because that will also determine how we go about creating it. Like if we speak to people and we understand this is something that they do want to have in their life, but then that's not something that's such a big problem for them that they would invest a lot of money into solving it. When we understand that, then we can't make it like the super high ticket course because no one's going to pay that much for it. So when we understand that, yeah, it is a problem for them, but it's not so, it's like they have bigger problems also. So they're not going to invest like $1 lakh or something in this course. Then we figure out, okay, cool, we're going to price it maybe 20,000 or something like that. Okay, how much value can be offered in 20,000? Because again, this is also a business decision for the coach or for the entrepreneur, right? Like they're investing their time into making the course, into delivering this knowledge, all of that. Like what is something that we can do that makes sense for both parties? If it's a more affordable option, then we can't make it all live. We have to make a little bit of it recorded, all of these things. So then the course in itself starts shaping up of like, these are the features. Like, are we offering community? Community is a big aspect of learning that, like I am always like, there has to be community, because I think within learning, there's journey groups and like destination groups. Like the destination is the instructor themselves. Like that's where they want to be. They know, but what they also need on this journey is a journey group of peers who are also learning that right where they are. And there's so much you can get from them, right? Like you're having this very specific day-to-day problem, your instructor might never relate to it, but someone who's having that same problem in real time with you, they can relate to it. So having that community where we bring everyone together so they can interact this way is super important. So how is that going to work? Which platform does it go on? Like what level of engagement do we do on there? So we figure out the whole ecosystem of all of this, and then we get down to making the curriculum. So now that we have the transformation statement, we know that they want to go from A to B. Okay, cool. Let's work backwards, right? This is the outcome. Like, how do we get them there? What all do they need to know? What do they need to do? How do they do it? And how can we support them at each step? So we create as such, so the modules and the lessons and the assignments and the workbooks and all of that start shaping up as a way to support the learner on this journey that we have created for them. And then, once we have a good outline of how each lesson is going to flow, all of that, which is what we workshop together, like me and the client, because of course they have the subject matter expertise, and what I bring are the learning theories. So we workshop it together, create a good outline that we're both feeling confident with, and we get to creating the content. Especially within recorded content, it's very important, of course, to make it very engaging and as interactive as you can in a one-way format. So, like how can we make these lessons engaging? How can we cater to different types of learners? How can we cater to the audio learners and the visual learners? And, so all of that. So we start working on the content in itself. And then there's also a lot of technology involved in this. I think something that like people underestimate of like, there's so many tools and there's so many different types of, softwares that we have to use and the instructors have to learn how to use. So like finding the right one, finding a LMS platform that makes sense for them, that is affordable, that caters to all their needs. So a lot of research goes into all of this as well, finding all of this platforms, on what platform do they record, what platform do they make their slides, where do they host it, how do they do the live sessions, where does the community go? All these involve different software platforms. So giving them a good picture of what all is available so that they can take their pick. And then it all comes together. They take the content, they record it, I audit it, quality check it. When it's all good to go, we put it together, host it on the LMS platform, and then it gets launched to their audience.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting process, getting the big picture from the start to the finish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there any difference between designing a course for individual coaches and organizations or companies?
I think so. I think I haven't done in-house trainings in terms of like corporate trainings. I have worked in organizations to make direct-to-consumer products, and I have worked with individual creators to make direct-to-consumer products. And I think what the difference mainly is how creative you can be. I think within a larger organization, it's a little hard to experiment as much as you want and like try different things each time and all of that. There's a set way to do things, and when they know it works, it's like why would we want to experiment, right? It's like we have goals to hit, we need to churn out these many trainings, etc. So it's like you kind of get a little bit of like, okay, let's just do what we know works. But I think when working with individual entrepreneurs and individual coaches and creators, they are very open to experimenting. Like they're like, yeah, I want to make the best product ever, and I want to offer the best learning experience. So let's try things. And also because a lot of these are run in cohorts and in batches, it is always opportunity to iterate and change things up, and it can evolve with time. So like, let's try something this batch, doesn't work, let's do something else. If it works a little bit, let's see how we can make it better. But you don't have that level of I would say freedom to do that within an organization, because I think the consequence, it's much more high stakes, right? The consequences are much bigger. There's so many people involved. You can't just randomly do experiments. So they will have their time and place. And of course, all the experiments could fail. And then that's so that's also a risk that you're taking. But I think that would be the main difference in these two. But that was a great question. Thank you so much for asking. I never actually thought about that.
Thank you. How important is it to learn tools and LMSs in what you do? You mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's always important, especially in this day and age that we live, like instructional designers, being up to date with all of these, technology like platforms, as well as how much they change and what is up and coming, right? Something that could be better, that could make your life easier and the training better and all of that. I think being knowledgeable about at least what's out there is super important. But I think one thing I have observed myself, but also working with people creating trainings for them, is that these platforms are not as hard as people think they are. I think it just is, it becomes very intimidating when you think about it, and it's like, oh, there's so many, and like, how does one even work and all of that. But I think, like, first of all, individually, they're pretty I think they're designed pretty user friendly, and like it does not, it just, I think if you have an open mind, it's not very hard to just start using them. But also within each category, they're all pretty much the same. There's no one's coming out with this absolutely revolutionary LMS platform that's like unlike anything else and works completely differently and all of those things. No, each LMS platform is like, maybe there's a few features here and there that are different, but at the essence, they're all pretty much the same. So once you understand one, it's very easy to quickly understand all of them. So I think I think you shouldn't constrain yourself to like, oh, I only know this LMS platform, so I can only work with people who are okay using this LMS platform, and I can't work with anyone else. I think like give it a shot. If you know like Kajabi or something, and someone comes with like, hey, I want to use Thinkific, like they're pretty similar. It might take you like a little bit to get used to it, but they're pretty similar. So like just say yes, because what's important is actually the content and the curriculum and and the transformation. Like that's the stuff that's actually important. The LMS platform is just a place for you to host all of that. Like your students are now going to be transformed because of the LMS platform. They're going to be transformed by good learning, and that's what you're bringing to the table. So you shouldn't you shouldn't hold yourself back because you don't know a particular tool or software or anything like that. I think it's actually very easy to learn, and learning like the theory and like understanding how to teach is much harder than understanding some of these platforms. So I think they're super important because they help you deliver all of this to students, but they're also very easy, I would say.
Do you develop the content as well, or does the coach do it?
I think it's definitely like we do it together. I would say the content itself, of course, is given by them. Like there's no level of like, oh, I'm going to add in what I think about this topic here, but how to put it together, how should it flow, what all should be there, offering prompts to get a lot of stuff out of them. of like, because they might skip right away to a topic without giving enough context behind it, and without going to the foundation of that topic. They might go into a more application level in that particular topic. So getting them back to the basics of like, no, we have to, this is where we need to start, right? This is all they need to know, and this is where they need to go from there. That's something that I guide them through. But the topic and the content in itself is definitely from a subject matter expert. And creating it also is something that I've observed that in working independently with a lot of these entrepreneurs and coaches, is that they also take a lot of ownership and pride in creating the content themselves, right? It's like, no, like, my audience is buying from me because they want to learn from me. And right now I feel like I can't just completely fully outsource and just give away control of that. Like, there's a level of control that I would want to maintain with this. And of course, like, we can work on it together to see how best it can be presented and to make it engaging and all of that. But the actual content in itself is something that they feel very close to themselves. They would want to develop by themselves. And we just work on it to make it better and make it something that works and actually delivers the outcome intended. But the content itself is definitely there.
So how do you decide on the presentation mode, whether it is going to be their face or a screen recording or?
Yeah, I think within the topics, once, depending on what module it is, like what lesson it is, I think sometimes it becomes pretty obvious what mode they should take. When it's a technical training, when they're delivering any type of training on how to do something, I don't think a face is always required. It could even be distracting at times. So it's best, it's completely okay if it's just a screen recording of them taking them through something and how something works and how to do something. And I think when it's something which is like a more knowledge sharing kind of lesson, where it's like you're teaching a concept or you're trying to explain or give an example, things like that, I think having a presentation, having a PPT that has these definitions on them, that has if you're giving an example, like breaking down the example, having these characters, and having what you're describing with words, having that kind of visually represented also is super important. Because I myself am a visual learner, and like, someone can be telling me something for a long time, but it is not gonna register unless I see it on my screen or I see it on a board. So a lot of times, a lot of teachers, they're like, no, I'll just say it, they'll understand, like, even when I'm working with them. And they're like, I'm like, that's something that I stand up for, like, kind of on a more post level, because I'm like, no, you have to, I'm telling you, this topic really needs something visually represented, and here's how you can go about doing it, etc. And I think for the things that are maybe a little bit more, like, a lot of times we start off a lot of these trainings with a lot of mindset kind of aspects of approaching these topics, from like, okay, what kind of mindset do you need to have? Like, what's the right way to go about this mentally, things like that. I think those are areas where I'm a little bit more lax, in terms of like, you don't need a presentation if it's just the instructor delivering the knowledge. Also, it works, because it's more about them, it's more about the student at that time being more present and just really trying to reflect on and process and think about what you're really saying. So maybe in those times, maybe having something visual could be distracting as well. And it's not something that needs to register. It's not a definition. It's not, it's not a flowchart that needs to register on someone's brain. It's just about giving them food for thought to think in a particular way. So I think with things like that, I think it's okay if there's nothing on screen, etc. If it's just something for someone to process. But I think in each of these, they have their own unique, time and place for all these things, where they're super effective, and it's just about going through the curriculum and identifying what works in what place.
Apart from online courses, do you make offline courses or workshops or any other type of courses as well?
Oh, it's something I've been really wanting to do, and I'm actually speaking to someone right now who does psychology training in schools all over India for high school students. And I'm like, actually, I had a conversation with them. I'm like, I've never actually done it before, but I think in its essence, it's the same. There's some aspects of it that's different, but in essence, the delivery of it is very much the same, and that also requires presentations, and it also requires a curriculum and assignments and marking and all of that. So I think like that's something I would actually love to do, because like I would love, first of all, to work more with schools and colleges and on that level. That's personally I'm really passionate about. So this felt like a great entry gate into that. But yeah, I think there's some aspects of it that's different, of like creating that engagement like physically, and I think a little bit different than creating engagement virtually, because I think you have a lot of tools also, like you have these breakout rooms and all of these things that like, oh, with what we usually go to when we think of facilitating interaction live. And I think there's so much more scope to facilitating interaction physically, that I'm like, you have to get a little bit more creative, I think, with respect to how to actually go about doing these things. And it's a bit challenging. I've never actually fully done that before, but I'm in talk with someone, and I hope that I actually get an opportunity to do that, actually.
Mm-hmm. Sounds really interesting.
Yes.
What is the most crucial thing to succeed as a course designer?
Ooh, I think one of the most crucial things is having empathy. I would say, and that's also something that I personally, that's why I got into this, because that's something I have, is empathy for the students, right? Because I personally was a very rebellious student in like school and college. I did not like how our education system, I don't like how our education system is. I was not satisfied with how much I was learning and what ways I was learning and all of this, that I was like, so when I got an opportunity in my career to actually do something about that, I was like, this is exactly what I want to spend the rest of my life, because I'm like, I'm doing all of this for that past me that like felt frustrated in class and stuff like that. And I think so, even if it's not that intense, I think always thinking about the student, right? I think even when we're designing, we're like designing these design the content and the training, it's sometimes like, I mean, honestly, I think sometimes we can get lazy also. We can be like, oh, this fine, this works, like, let's not try to make it better. But I think having that empathy is like, is it actually fine? Does it actually work? Like, think about the student. Like, is this the best to get this across? I think if you actually have that, then you try to do better. You try to each time like go a little bit more further and give a little bit more, just to make sure that the student who's going to be consuming this at the end of this really gets the most out of it, and they don't feel frustrated. They're not left confused of like, hey, I don't think this addressed everything, or like they don't zone out and actually it's so boring. They don't like not get what you're trying to say and all these things. So I think having this like radical empathy for students who are learning this and wanting the best for them, I think is the most important thing to succeed as a course designer, because that will lead to I would say, the best courses.
During COVID, the e-learning industry witnessed a boom, but now we are seeing market corrections and layoffs. So where do you anticipate the e-learning industry is headed?
Ooh, tough question. I think the problem with, I think a lot of the e-learning, I mean, again, I'm no expert, but I have been like looking into it closely, because it's kind of very relevant to me also. So I think the companies that are not doing so well are ones that don't have distribution and don't have their own community. So I think because acquiring customers is very expensive. Is the problem, I think, with tech companies. They're spending a lot on customer acquisition, and that's why they're like running out of money, and because of like VC money drying up, a lot of them are like laying off employees and shutting down. But I think I think the companies who have first of all built a community, but also understand their community and are building courses keeping that community in mind. I think those, because a lot of them are doing well. Like I personally like know a lot who are still like, very much in the green, are like growing exponentially month over month, even in this current time. So I think what they have done well is build a community. And I think that's why I think lately there's been a lot of conversation around community when it comes to like learning. I think we have been placing so much emphasis on content all this time, of like content is what it is and content is the most important thing and all of that. I think lately we're starting to see that like, yes, but there's only so much that content can do. we have to go above content and think about more things. And I think what we have arrived at is community. I think community is something, this missing thing that we weren't giving enough importance to before. And I think the ones who have cracked that are doing well, and I think will continue doing well. And that's something I'm trying to educate myself more on. Like what is the true essence of community within learning, and like how do you facilitate that? How do you nurture it, create it, nurture it, all of that, which is just like, so there's so much aspects to it. But I think, yeah, that's my I would say summary of like what's happening and what I think.
Yeah, very well said, because social learning is a very integral part. If we look back at our school days, it can't be only about the teacher. Our friends, our school friends, they matter a lot. When we think of school, childhood would be different, very different if it was only about the teacher.
Yeah, very true. Which is why a lot of people say that like, oh, e-learning will never like take over offline learning, right? It's never going to be that. It's going to be the it's going to be either or. They each have their own place, and the reason why offline learning is still makes sense is because of that social learning. Because like it's just to be in that like classroom to learn among with peers physically is just so valuable, that like, yeah, you can try to kind of replicate that through e-learning, but I think it's the best for sure when it's like physical and it's actually there. Yeah.
What would you like to do next? Do you have a career goal?
I think in terms of what I do like to do next is more of what I'm doing now. Like I think creating a real dent in the education industry in India, at least, is something that I'm very, very passionate about doing. I would love to be on like the advisory board of like a college, and really shape curriculum and like have a real say in how students are spending their years in that college and how we can make that better, and all of that. I would love to teach physically as well. I love teaching myself. So I would love to teach about teaching or teach about learning, things like that. But just create as much impact as possible in the education space. I think it's a super exciting and like super interesting space to be in. There's so much to it, and it's like I think it's one of the most important things that I've done in my life, I think. Just continue to do more of that in whatever way it looks like. Like right now, it's creating online courses. Like later it could be something else entirely, but education will never not be a thing. It'll always be a part of society. So whatever is the most is the best way in that period of time to create some impact in this, I would be there.
I love that you mentioned impact. That is my goal as well.
Oh,
education industry.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think with this, right? I think with facilitating these conversations and bringing these people on, like all of us on a platform and being able to reach people, I think that's so much impact in itself. Like if you didn't facilitate all of this, like these stuff wouldn't get told, and I think that in itself is just so impactful. So I love the whole channel and the idea of it and the vision for it, and it's super exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What is your message to aspirant, new and experienced IDs?
I think I wouldn't say I'm anywhere close to being an experienced ID at all. So I honestly would not know what to tell them. But I think for new and aspiring instructional designers, I would say I think something that's super important is to be curious, and have that curiosity. I think it is a job, but it also can be so much more than a job, right? So I think to really give all of yourself into every product that you're making, and everything that you're creating, and that comes with being curious about the topic in itself. And I'm a generalist, like I like a little bit of everything, like any topic, and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. I might not go too deep into it, but I'm like, oh, that thing that I learned is super interesting, and move on to the next thing. So I think having that curiosity makes it first of all the work so much more fun, because you're not just getting some random content and you're doing something with it. It's you're actually like reading into it and looking into it and like learning something from that content in itself. So being curious about a lot of different things, I think will I'm sure in the bigger picture will help you become a better instructional designer, but in the short term also will just make your work more fun. And if it's not fun, you're not going to stay on this journey. So if you want to continue being here and get to being I would say get to being an experienced instructional designer, I think having curiosity might really, really help.
Mhm.
But I'd love to know from you as well, what do you think? You have so much more experience than me. So what would you say is actually something that you would tell like a new instructional designer?
Oh, no, I did not know the term instructional design until a few months back, until about
Oh,
November.
oh,
And
interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
I was just looking at job openings in LinkedIn, and the
Mm.
algorithm started suggesting instructional design to me. And then I was like, okay, what is this? And I started looking at the job descriptions. Then I did the LinkedIn pathway of 8 courses.
Oh, wow.
And I have teaching experience. I used to be an online teacher with an NGO. I taught rural government school children in
Oh,
Kannada
wow.
medium. And that teaching experience, and also I had created a magazine. So that content editing both led me to instructional design. And
Wow. That
I've
is
been
so
in instructional
interesting.
design for about 6 months now.
Oh, that's so interesting. No, I love how like you had this like perfect background to actually get into this. That's so interesting. See, I would have never known. Like I genuinely thought you were like this like very, very experienced instructional designer. I think that's definitely the vibe that you give off. And it's yeah, I think it's like very surprising if you're not. But I think having teaching experience going into instructional design, I think is just like so valuable. So that is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. And I was talking to people, and that's how I came to know that there are so many different things. Because when I was applying to jobs, I was applying for everything from content editor to LMS admin to instructional designer, and I did not know the difference where one ended and another began. And some recruiters, they had even told me that these are very different roles.
Hmm.
But if somebody told me, no, I don't work on storyboarding, then I would think, okay, so what else they work on? So
Hmm.
what do they do? And by talking to people, I got to learn so much about instructional design. And even I was thinking, what should I do next? Is there any other course that I should do, or what will be the career progression like? And that's when talking to different people helped me understand much more about this field. So I thought, okay, if I just have it in a recorded form, it can be a reference for me for later, and it can also help others. So that's how this interview series began.
Oh, wow. That is so smart. No, absolutely. It's like, I love that right away when you only started like seeing some benefit of it, you saw that like, if I'm seeing benefit in this, like, like if you have these questions, so many other people also could be having the same questions. And like, yeah, might as well just like put it out there for them also to get answers to it. And yeah, I think in terms of instruction design content, especially within India, I just like, even I haven't found like this great like go-to place, right? Like of everything that has to do with this whole industry and stuff like that. And even I would say like even the societal education around this role is like very less. Like people like I'm like yeah, a lot of people like don't even know this thing even exists and all these things, even though it's just the impact of it is so wide. It's like if you work in any company, you would have like consumed the work of an instructional designer, but you don't even know the company like an instructional designer exists,
Yes.
which is just so funny. So yeah, I think this is very much needed. And yeah, as a fellow in the industry, I thank you for creating this space. And I think this it definitely has so much. I see the vision of it can be so much bigger and like so many different aspects to it. So yeah,
So
very
even when I
powerful.
was talking to people on phone calls, I would take notes, but still
Yeah.
there is only so much you can write down. So having a recorded conversation would be much better for myself as well. And also, yeah, even when talking, I discovered that there is so much more, and there are different terms for the same thing, and there is a lot of confusion around it as well. I have mentioned in the previous interviews that people ask me, like, when you don't know the subject, how can you teach it to others? Or when you say I'm an instructional designer, what, you're an interior designer? You're you know,
Industrial designer also, I've heard. Yes.
instrumentation designer.
Yeah.
Even recruiters who call for job openings, they stumble upon a few terms and then they get it right.
Yeah, I know it's wild how people don't know about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think things like this. I think definitely, like, I really hope, that like this, like, just like reaches so many people, because I'm like, like, hey, like, software engineer, we're like, software engineers, like, instructional designers should definitely be a term like that.
Yeah.
So
Wherever teaching is there, instructional design has a place.
yeah, absolutely. And I think even in terms of like college, like there's so few like colleges and stuff like that also where you can go learn instructional design, So I'm like, I would love to see more of that also, of like more like courses and stuff like that for instructional designers to actually learn. And like it just very much should be like because the demand is there. Like, again, like I also have like all my job recommendations are also, of course, in e-learning and instruction design. So I see there's just so many jobs available, for instruction design. And I think if people knew this thing existed, like they would actually go study it and be eligible for all of that. And I think it's absolutely about awareness. And I love that that's what you're actually solving for.
Thank you. We have an audience question.
Oh.
This is from Ranjit. He's asking, any other forms of measuring effectiveness of learning other than assessments or quizzes?
Yeah, I think the way that I always say to measure the effectiveness of what you have created, I think a lot of times we look at completion rates, right? Of like, oh, if they have completed these number of videos, that means it's a success, kind of a thing. And I think completion rates is not a great measure of seeing whether something is good and effective. I think there's assessments and quizzes, but I think there's also about seeing what can your students do differently now? How can they think differently now? I think understanding that. And the way to understand that is to encourage the students to actually speak to you while they're going through the course, while also after the course. So if you can create a space where students can freely talk about the transformations they're having, you'll very quickly realize that, oh, these people are able to do something now that they couldn't do before. And that's the whole point of why they would have taken a course in the first place. And being able to do something, but also think something. A lot of things are like, most things in life are like 80% mindset and 20% strategy and all of that, right? So if you can even think about something in a different way now, your chance of success in that is so much bigger. So I think even if you've been able to get the students to a point where they're thinking differently about something, I think that's also a big win. So creating spaces where students can tell you this, of like tell you these small transformations they're having, these small wins that they're seeing in their life, is a great way to measure how successfully you've created a learning product and how well it's working. And yeah, like even if someone fails at like this quiz that you have made, but they just have a different perspective on something now, I think that's still a win. That's a great question, though. Thank you so much to the audience.
How do you mention, how do you mean when you say that you have to get them to talk to you? Because even if they type, it will be a lot of text information, or we may not always be able to give conversation time. So what is the method of talking to the learner?
Yeah, I think there's various different ways to go about doing this. The simplest way would be to have community. So when you have a community and you're offering prompts, like, hey, like you ask them a question that will give you the answer that you're looking for, right? On that community, and people comment below and stuff like that. So this can be like on a Facebook group or a Slack channel, Discord, whatever it is. Having a community where you can directly interact with students is one way of so even if you don't ask them something and they tell you, having an active community, what it also does is people want to just come and share on their own. So when there's a very active community where people are sharing all the time, when I'm taking a course on something, like let's say I'm taking a course on weight loss or something like that, and my approach to eating mindfully has changed. My approach to stopping when I'm 80% full or something like that has changed. And one day I'm eating and I actually do that, and I find myself that I'm like doing something different now, and I'm so excited. I want to go on this community and share this thing, So having that space where they can do it is one way of getting to know. But other ways are, I think what I encourage in the with the people that I work with, they have student feedbacks. So like there's one when they just start the training, they just start the course, of like having questions where they can reflect on things, get a good understanding of where they're at, what their expectations are. So ask them what their expectations are before they start the course, and then right in the middle of the course duration, have another feedback, kind of activity where you're asking them what their experience has been, what have they liked, what have they not liked, and things like, yeah, what changes do you see in yourself? Like, how is your thinking on this different? Are you able to do this? Things like that. Ask them. That is a great way to get all this information. And then, of course, at the end also, when they're done with the course, to ask them questions that you can try to understand how they're different now than when they started the course. So I think, yeah, these are definitely a few ways. You can also speak to them directly. You can message a student that you know is taking the course actively and be like, hey, can I talk to you? Can I chat with you for 5 minutes? And just like talk to them and ask them how has their experience been and what changes have they seen in themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's again so insightful, because I see that we are not talking to learners as much as needed. So that opening up the conversation itself will make the course much, much better.
Absolutely. I think it makes the student experience also much better when you know that you're being heard, right? I think it definitely works both ways. So like I'm a big proponent of like speak to the students before, speak to the students during, after, all the time, just keep speaking to the students.
Thank you, Srilekha, for giving us your time, that too on a Sunday morning. Thank you, audience. You've been brilliant with great questions. Please like, share, and subscribe to encourage the channel. See you again next Sunday at 11 a.m.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Had a wonderful time.
Thank you.